If you think that the builders of Gobekli Tepe and the other megalithic sites in the region do not count as a civilization, then by the end of this video you'll probably change your mind. Because by using the mainstream criteria for what a civilization is, I'm going to show why it's very likely this culture will eventually be reclassified, and thus rewrite the entire timeline of human civilization. Hi guys, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Michael. I have a degree in ancient history, and on this channel we discuss the unexplainable mysteries of our past. Let's get into it. Now, if you're watching this video, I'm sure you've heard of Gobekli Tepe, but just very quickly, in case you've been living under a rock.
Gobekli Tepe is an astounding megalithic site, dated at approximately 11,600 years old, predating the accepted start of civilization by 5,000 years. It's nearly twice as old as the already mysterious Stonehenge, but even crazier, Gobekli Tepe isn't just older, it's 50 times larger than Stonehenge, covering an absolutely mind-blowing 20 acres, and despite its sheer scale, we have no idea who built it, how they built it, or even when. The site contains at least 20 massive circular enclosures, only 4 of which have been excavated so far. These enclosures consist of nearly 200 huge T-shaped limestone pillars, most of which are still buried underground but have been identified by geophysical surveys. Many of these pillars are 20 feet tall and some weigh as much as 10 metric tons. Some unfinished pillars discovered at the site suggest even larger ones, and many of these pillars are decorated by unbelievably intricate carvings of animals, abstract symbols, and possible astronomical alignments. And just look at this level of skill. It would have required incredible sophistication and dedication to achieve. This clearly isn't the work of a primitive society. They were undoubtedly unbelievably knowledgeable, and on top of this, the sheer levels of planning, organization, and logistics required to construct such an enormous site is astounding. So who created it? How did they build it, and why? How did they transport these gigantic pillars? This only becomes more intriguing when you realize that Gobekli Tepe came over 5,000 years before the invention of the wheel.
It's a truly remarkable, astoundingly old, and magnificently mysterious ancient site. However, what fewer people realize is that Gobekli Tepe is not an isolated construction. No, in fact, it's becoming increasingly clear that this same mysterious culture, whoever they were, built multiple similar sites scattered across the surrounding region.
Sites like Karahan Tepe, Seyfer Tepe, Navali Churi, Harbet Zuvan Tepe, Sayburç, Ayan Lahyuk, Gurja Tepe, Çakmak Tepe, and many others are all found in this area. This clearly wasn't a one-off marvel. It was a network, hinting at a much broader and more complex society than we ever imagined, well before the accepted start of civilization.
Now, we don't know for certain, but the evidence strongly suggests the builders of these ancient sites were part of a shared, interconnected cultural horizon, what some are beginning to call the Tachtapella Culture.
We can say this with some confidence due to the architectural similarities between the sites. The T-shaped pillars, circular enclosures, and megalithic layouts are consistent, suggesting shared building knowledge or symbolic meaning. There's common symbolism. Animal reliefs, abstract carvings, and specific mythological motifs appear repeatedly, hinting at shared cosmology or rituals. Many of them appear to have astronomy baked into their architecture. The sites share geographic proximity, clustered in southeastern Turkey, within a few hundred kilometers of each other. And we see chronological overlap. Radiocarbon dating places these sites within the same window, roughly 9000 BC. Finally, there is no sign of conflict or cultural disruption. Unlike what you see in areas with clashing civilizations, there's no sign that these sites were built by competing groups. The stylistic and symbolic continuity suggests cooperation and cultural unity.
So what we're starting to see is an interconnected, megalithic building culture spanning dozens of sites with shared symbolism and astronomical knowledge, suggesting not isolated bands of hunter-gatherers, but a shared tradition, a coordinated worldview, and the earliest known form of organized religion. So why isn't this culture, whoever they were, considered a civilization?
Well, according to the mainstream view, all civilizations have certain characteristics. These include large population centers, monumental architecture, and unique art styles, shared communication strategies, systems for administering territories, a complex division of labor, and the division of people into social and economic classes.
Now, many would argue that Gobekli Tepe and these sites, while impressive, do not meet this criteria, but I would argue against that. Let's break it down.
Here are the criteria that Gobekli Tepe and the surrounding culture definitely matches. Firstly, monumental architecture. Yes, across multiple sites we see massive T-shaped stone pillars and circular enclosures built with sophisticated engineering. Undeniable monumental architecture. Next, specialized labor. Yes, the site implies coordinated labor, with craftsmen, i.e. sculptors, specializing in their craft. You don't reach this level of skill without specialization. Thirdly, organized religion. Yes, the entire Göbekli Tepe site appears to be religious or ceremonial in nature, as do many of the others. And finally, distinctive art or cultural expression. Yes again, elaborate carvings of animals, abstract symbols, and stylistic consistency across structures shows a shared form of cultural expression.
All that, I think, is undisputed. So now on to the criteria that we can't directly prove, but that I would argue are very likely given the sheer scale of the construction.
We probably see evidence of centralized authority. The scale, uniformity, and symbolic coherence of the sites suggests centralized planning, likely guided by a religious or social elite capable of organizing large groups for complex construction over generations. It's unlikely that such a huge construction project could be organized without leaders. Next, social stratification, again almost certainly. The effort required to build and maintain these sites implies division of labor, with some individuals freed from subsistence tasks, hinting at social hierarchies and specialized roles within the community. We see this uniformly in human societies throughout history, so it would be very odd for these people to not act the same. And finally, there's growing evidence of a broader network or trade system. While we can't say for certain that sites like Karahan Tepe, Nevali Churi, and others were directly connected through trade, their striking architectural and symbolic similarities suggest a common cultural framework spread across a wide region. This kind of cultural cohesion is a hallmark of civilization. On top of that, some tools and materials found at these sites appear to originate from outside the immediate area, hinting at long-distance exchange or interaction. These patterns point to a level of regional connectivity and shared identity far beyond what we'd expect from isolated groups. So this culture are already hitting a lot of the criteria of what we consider civilization. However, what we definitely have no evidence of yet is the final three: cities, writing/record keeping, or agricultural surplus.
But let's just dive into these in a bit more detail.
It's true we haven't yet uncovered evidence of cities around Göbekli Tepe, and critics often use that to argue this wasn't a true civilization. But think about it. To build something on this scale, you'd need hundreds, if not thousands, of people working together over long periods. That kind of effort requires a large enough population to sustain specialized labor. It seems likely that to pull this off, many of these people would have lived nearby, not scattered in tiny roaming bands, but clustered in permanent or semi-permanent settlements. And while we haven't found any city ruins, nearby sites like Nevali Churi and Karahan Tepe show houses, communal buildings, and even ritual spaces, the hallmarks of an organized society. Across the world, cultures that build massive sacred monuments always have central populations behind them. So while we're yet to find cities, the monument itself demands a support system, and that system almost certainly included population centers. Next, the lack of evidence of writing or record keeping is often used to argue it wasn't a true civilization, but writing isn't the only way to organize a complex society. The Inca Empire had no written scripts, yet they are considered a civilization. Göbekli Tepe is covered in abstract carvings and animal symbols, not random decorations, but likely part of a symbolic system we simply don't understand yet. Just because we can't read it doesn't mean it wasn't meaningful. Civilizations don't always leave behind neat archives, sometimes they communicate in ways that vanish with time or that we haven't yet deciphered. Finally, the lack of clear evidence for agricultural surplus in the Gobekli Tepe culture is used to argue that this disqualifies it. But again, absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. The builders of Gobekli Tepe didn't just show up, stack some rocks, and then leave. The scale and sophistication of the monument suggest a food system capable of supporting non-farming labor. Stone carvers, transporters, organizers, this implies surplus. You don't get hundreds of people working on sacred architecture unless someone's feeding them. And nearby evidence of early domesticated grains and herd animals hints that this region was transitioning into agriculture. The labor itself and the permanence of the project strongly suggest that surplus existed, even if it hasn't been found yet. Adding to all this is a crucial fact. Less than 10% of Göbekli Tepe has been excavated, and that's not just the site itself. The entire surrounding region remains largely unexplored. What we've uncovered so far is already enough to challenge long-held assumptions about early human society, and yet we're only seeing a tiny fragment of the full picture. It's entirely possible that settlements, storage areas, tools, written communication, and surplus are still buried beneath the soil. So when critics point to a lack of cities, writing, or surplus, they're often mistaking we haven't found it yet for it never existed. So I would would argue that all these criteria are at least a likely, and that with time we're going to start to see a green tick next to every single one of them.
But even with all of that, with everything I've just said, maybe you still don't think this culture counts as a civilization. And that is fine, but it does lead me to ask, do we need to redefine civilization?
Maybe it's time to shift from a checklist like this of cities, writing, etc. to a spectrum, where symbolic thought, spiritual cohesion and monumental collaboration matter just as much as bureaucracy and agriculture. Our current definition basically reflects Mesopotamia, farming, kings, taxes, but Göbekli Tepe might represent a different kind of civilization, a spiritual first model, one without large-scale cities. Urbanization is a symptom, not a requirement. Maybe it's just a different type of civilization.
To be honest, it feels a bit to me like a double standard. If a site from, say, 2000 BC had temples, coordinated labour, religious symbolism and cultural unity, we would definitely call it a civilization. So why not here? Well, I think it's purely due to the old date. We can't call this culture a civilization without completely rewriting the timeline of human history. And so the mainstream are extremely reluctant to do so and seem to be jumping through all kinds of hoops not to. However, I think that with time, the culture responsible for Göbekli Tepe will be redefined as a civilization. It's just going to take a little while. And thus our understanding of human history and the timeline of human civilization will be completely upended. And that's pretty exciting. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to my channel. Peace!